Okay, let's address this question that I got today. It's opportunity for you to learn a ton about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. This is going to be a very thorough, detailed video. SPR, when Trump left office, 638 million barrels. By November of 24, down to 200 million. If Biden facilitated energy production, how did the reserve crash? Around 70% during his term. This is from my father, and it's way out of my depth. Can you please help me understand what he's asking? Absolutely. So he is correct. There was 638 million barrels of oil in the SPR when Donald Trump left, but he is not correct about how much was in there in November 24, because that number is not 200 million barrels. That number is 395 million barrels. What that means is during the Biden administration, we had a reduction of 243 million barrels in the SPR. Here's the part you don't know. All of that oil was sold before Joe Biden ever took office. And what I mean by sold is all of that oil had been congressionally mandated to be sold at some point in the future. Every drop of it. This is why you shouldn't listen to the politicians and the media. All of the politicians screaming about oil being sold out of the SPR literally voted for that oil to be sold. Yes. There were 3 pieces of legislation passed under the Obama administration that was bipartisan legislation. That means it had overwhelming support from both sides. The FAST Act, the Cures Act, and the 2015 budget. And that called for the sale of nearly 150 million barrels of oil out of the SPR that they were going to sell between 2017 and 2025. In addition to that, there was 2 more pieces of legislation during the Trump administration that called for the sale of 107 million barrels of oil, the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018, and the Trump Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Another 107 million barrels to be sold out of the SPR. That's a total of 256 million barrels of congressionally mandated sales. When Joe Biden left office, there was 243 less million barrels of oil in the SPR. So in 2022, when gas prices reached $5 a gallon, what Joe Biden did was he took what was left of all of those congressionally mandated sales and he moved them forward and had that oil sold over a 6-month period. You see, the amount of oil that we are required to have in the SPR is enough to cover 90 days of import protection. And as you can see on these charts, as our imports dropped over the last 20 years, our days of protection increased because we're importing less oil. What that means as an IEA nation, we don't have to keep as much oil in the SPR as we used to. Keep in mind, when there was 714 million barrels of oil in the SPR, when it was completely full, we didn't have 90 days of import protection because we were importing a ton of oil. Yes. And now with 395 million, we have way more than 90 days of import protection because we're a net exporter. And what that means is for every 2 million barrels a day currently, in the SPR, we get 1 day of protection. So in order to meet our legal obligations, right now, we need to have 180 million barrels of oil in the SPR. We have more than twice that amount because we have 395 million barrels, which means we have well over 200 days of import protection just in the SPR. This does not include oil we have stored around the country in private tanks, which is about another 450 million barrels on average. Now, personally, I do believe we should refill the SPR back to 714 million barrels a day, because what if we can't retain our production and import status? What if that change? What if our production drops? What if our imports increase? If all of that happens, then all of the math regarding the SPR changes. Keep in mind the SPR was established after the Arab oil embargo of the 70s. They basically cut us off, right? So we needed a strategic petroleum reserve. So the purpose of the SPR is clearly stated right here on the SPR's website. It is to reduce the impact of disruptions in supplies of petroleum products and to carry out obligations of the United States under the IEA program. What was our disruption in supply? This, the OPEC 2020 deal, brokered by Donald Trump. This called for a 2-year, 10% production cut by OPEC. Nearly 10 million barrels of oil a day was taken off the market for 2 years due to COVID. The problem with this deal, which was a horrible deal, was that 9 months after this deal, we came out of COVID and demand returned. So oil went to $120, gas went to $5 a gallon. So we had a supply disruption, so we used the SPR to fill the gap. That's what it's for. That's literally what it's for. It's not for times of war. We've never once used it in times of war. And we've been involved in some kind of war for the last 30 years. So there you go. Everything you needed to know about the SPR in 5 minutes. Thanks.